What's a challenge recently or something you're dealing with? Let me feed you. I'll feed you my one, guys, because mine's a bit of a blend. I haven't. Sorry to say, I haven't had a. I've had a great start to the year, to be honest. Still a lot of challenges, as that I just accept that those challenges will continuously keep happening as long as they don't repeat the same exact problem. But because we're just growing quickly, there's always going to be things that like kinks in the armor. But a challenge. I've got a bit of an emergency right now. It's kind of like it's been crisis stations this week for good reasons because our sales guys are absolutely flying. They are like off the charts flying. They've tripled the performance of last month to this month because their pipelines are stacking and stacking and stacking. And particularly for the buy to let refurbs. So we went from doing an average of 7 a month in the last quarter of last year. And they've already done 17 this month, and they'll be at about 20 by the month's end. Literally every day, there's a new close getting over the line. But what that means is that's 20 sites plus an already 20 deep conveyancing pipeline plus 14 we're already on site with. That's all going to fucking tidal wave onto itself for operations. So at the start of this week, I went, cool, battle stations, build out a bit of a deck for what we need to do. How can we pull this back, and not pull it back in terms of growth, but how can we strip back our ops to be built for this type of scale? Because I just didn't expect it to happen this quick. This was meant to happen by sort of summertime. So what I've done is brought in an ops manager who came in yesterday for an interview. Now this is a 90 grand package kind of guy that I need to suddenly bring into this business, and I'm bringing him in 3-4 months early because I want him to come in, strip apart how we currently operate that business, which is a lot of internal trades, a couple subcontractors, and 2 site supervisors with an admin, and it's very week to week at the moment. What I want to do instead is bring in this ops manager who's basically a contracts manager. He also used to be a big house basher pre 2008, took on his family business, and he was doing tens of millions a year in that business up in Scotland. So he's really got great experience. We ran him through the whole business yesterday. Bear in mind, I only first spoke to him yesterday. We had a load of CVs come through. And he's going to do a shadow day on Friday and be involved in the refurbs meeting as a little bit of an acid test. And then if he's great, he's going to start on Monday. And the idea is I want to flip how we, and this is where your guys' brains might be really interesting how we think of this idea. With the buy-to-let refurbs, the nature of the work is very, very simple. It's fitting kitchens, fitting bathrooms, it's cosmetic refurbs, it's very straightforward, basically no structural, no building control, no planning permission. It's all really straightforward, right? But the volume is the difficult bit. So it's an operational challenge of allocating resources, keeping things on schedule, and trying to cycle the work as efficiently as we can. So we buy ourselves 12 to 14 weeks to deliver each project, which is ample time. So what we're thinking of doing is instead of treating it site by site and doing weekly site meeting reports of the entirety of the site, instead treat clusters of projects that are geographically located near each other. So say we might have 5 or 10 in this given area, treat them like they're one big site. So we allocate that portion of site for this next quarter of delivery and treat it like a sign-off procedure as if we're doing an apartment scheme. And then internally, we've already got a qualified electrician. We've got a guy with his gas certs. We'll have those guys manage a subcontractor packages of electrics and plumbing. Same with the joiner. They're focused on their packages within that cluster of projects. And then our site supervisors, yes, they can tick off those bits of work, but they're focused more on the multi-skilled work that's required for fixing damp, the odds and sods and grippers and like all that kind of stuff. But then we can have our carpet guys, we can have our decorators all on packages managed almost by like line managers, and they feed back into ops manager, who's then just keeping an eye on program, resource, centralized procurement anyway. And I feel like we can change it into more of like a principal contractor kind of beast, even though it's managing like very simple domestic works. That's my thinking. What do you think about that?
For me, that'd be quite simple. I wouldn't want all the responsibility of having all the line managers. I would have it as a package. So for each one, you take all the things you do on every single property. So if it's a new kitchen all the time, if it's take the Artex off, whatever it is, put skirting boards on, I'd package that up into one product, and then I would go out and say, right, you can have 2 of these a month, 3 of these a month, 4 of these a month, based on your machine. So he builds back, you basically give him the basic package with the anomalies, and then you just build a list of all the additional bits that need doing. And then you internally would go, it needs the main package plus these 4 things. There's the price. Go and do it. and then I'd build the build program around them having 4, 5, 6, 7 weeks to do it, and then have penalties on the back end and a payment schedule based on what they've done. And then the more ambitious ones will take on 3, 4, 5 teams and take more of you, and you become a sole agent where you spit out the projects that are ready to go. And they take them for me. Yes, please. They write about the geographics where they are locally. They write about the internals, their electricians, plumbers, roofers. But out of the back end, you get all the documents you need. Everything's they're all insured for your sites. You've got them exactly where you need them. But you just sell the packages on, and
Yeah.
let them use their network.
Yeah, no, we will sell the packages, but as in it, there'll still be subcontracted price work, built-in frameworks for agreed prices on our product spec and things like that. But the idea is that rather than have a site supervisor managing all those packages, instead, I think we can get more scale out the supervisors, and more quality control, because we'd have a professional, qualified gas guy who's obviously a plumber and work focusing on the mechanical packages, and then we'd have an electrician focusing on the electrical packages, and then maybe
It's not that difficult, mate. You don't need a gas engineer going around every site just checking the gas.
No, 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 he won't be checking on every site, but he's making sure that all those procedures getting signed off, because we will be on about 50 to 80 sites at any given time at the rate of sales we're doing for just those. And I just feel like a site supervisor having to deal with all those methods of work, who's not necessarily qualified in those domains, I reckon that will be a pinch point where quality could get lost. Whereas if it's a specified person in that domain, and they're looking after, say, 80 kitchen fits a month or 80 bathroom fits a month, they'll have a much cleaner understanding of how those things would work, and then audit those subbies who might be taking on.
Your only risk there, Ryan, is that you're introducing a single line of failure there. If that gas engineer doesn't turn up or goes off sick or hands his notice in, and you've structured your team to be reliant on him doing it. There's nothing wrong with having Clark who works at quality control, but Stuart I would agree with Stuart. I mean, you bring in bona fide subcontractors who are gas engineers. If they give you the cert that says it's signed off compliant to building regs, um, that is what their insurance covers. That is what you're
Yeah,
employing them to do.
but you still need someone to prep that work, right? You still need, and I think we'll get more scale out of it if we do it this way, just because like a site supervisor, like who's covering that many sites and looking after that many pieces of work in prepping that site, and what needs to be done in the bathroom. Do we need to move the waste pipe? Do we need to do this and that? Having a site supervisor having to carry all that information across all those different sites, I don't think is scalable. Whereas if you just have someone focused on their package.
It should be a sales team. If you're going there and sending your brother in to look at a property, he should be checking off a tick list, going, "He's this. There's your package built. You sell it on to an investor. There's your package and your fixed costs with your
But
bona
you
fide
can't do, can you?
contractors."
'Cause you could pull back carpet and the copper's pulled out, or there's
Yeah, but they'll
or
be
and
on
you
the
might not
anomalies.
know that.
You'd have 2 pages or 3 pages of your basic standout work. That would go into your terms of contract, your terms of business with your investor to go, look, we've captured this bit, but until we pull the carpet back, we don't know if the floors are rotten. So that would be
Yeah.
a variation. Then there's your cost per square meter or per floorboard, however you want to price it. So all the effort in that model is all at the front end, where the sales guy goes and goes tick, 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 tick. You've got your bases covered. And every time you miss one, you swallow the cost, not the investor, and you add it to your list, and you build your margin in to make sure you can cover those costs.
It is all in the pre-con, and we do as much as we can on the viewings to capture all the costings, and we've built like all the matrices so that they can tick the boxes and capture all the costs they can. But you only get 15 minutes in a viewing. It's just not enough time for them to be able to capture a full survey. So we have to layer it into the conveyancing, a detailed like survey. And there's so many things that you can miss on a viewing without being intrusive.
Basically, right? Because again, just what I've learned over the years is there are companies that are already doing this. What you really need to do, like literally, there are companies on refurbishment frameworks that do it for housing associations, where they literally go in and they do 20, 30 refurbs a month, council refurbs. Well, you need to literally go and see how they operate and just mimic their structure, because it
So our
obviously works.
Or hire
the ops
someone that's
manager
doing it.
Yeah, or hire somebody that's got that.
Yeah, the operations manager we're bringing in, that's exactly what he did. So he used to manage like 30 domestic refurbs at a time. And this is where we think this, and he came up with all of these challenges. And this is where we think this would be a cleaner way to deal with it, by divisionalizing. It's like you would treat a bigger site. Like you'd have a foreman of works, like, or clerk of works for that specific package. So I think it's just a different way of thinking about it, because generally anyone who's dealing with like volume of refurbs, the hardest thing is quality control on the packages, because what we've learned doing the HMOs is no matter how good your site supervisor is, they just miss shit because there's just too much across that many sites to look after for one person's brain and bandwidth. You know what I mean?
You have it on new build sites as well. They're focused on health and safety. They're focused on inductions. They're focused on logistics and deliveries. They got to do their They got to do their weekly program. They got pre-lets they're involved with. There's so much bandwidth. You're definitely right. That's why there are clerker works for client side. There are internal clerker works. There are package managers when it's big enough, or just
Yeah.
externals or groundworks or M&E. That definitely is the case. But I think as long as you've got somebody, because this is just as brutal as it is, that can copy the structure of firms already doing it successfully, because this is a proven model, then you are, hopefully it works, and you just have to make some tweaks for yourselves. But you're having that person experience is important.
The only things I'd add to that, because I think it's all good feedback. I think I like what Stuart does with his lofts is almost built out in pods. So you get a team that get to know each other work, and can rinse and repeat and be more efficient. I think if you do have a foreman, and that could be, you could work out the biggest package, if that's the kitchen fitting or the bathroom, and go to the kitchen fitter or the bathroom fitter. You're going to run this job. You're incentivized to monitor all the works because you're here every day. And I will pay you time, quality, and cost review, but you get it in a deferred payment structure. So once the tenant moves in, and we've had all of the teething problems, and they've said that everything works, there's no leaks, blah blah blah, we do a final 3-month inspection, and then you get a deferred £1,000 payment to monitor that project, the time, quality, and cost review. And you could do 500 quid for quality, 500 quid for time, 500 quid for cost. And then what you would end up doing is that person would be solely incentivized for always their tracked payments 3 months in. So as you grow, they do more, you do more. They can actually build a very successful sub business. And then one other, I completely agree. Like, find someone that's done it before and look at that model. But one thing I will say, an interesting, I suppose, thought process is, I studied business in A levels, and you talk about batch production, flow production, continuous production, and how you produce things. And this is more product led or construction led on different projects. I worked at a turkey farm who's actually a family friend of ours. They've been in business for probably 50 years, and they produce 100,000 turkeys every year. And it's a really difficult business to manage because every single person wants their turkey within 3 days of Christmas, and they rear the turkeys all year round. And then they've literally got a few weeks to get all of their product onto their customer's desk. So imagine you were getting 100,000 buy-to-lets ready all the day before Christmas.
Yes.
It's an absolute logistical nightmare. But what I learned from working there and sort of helping, while I was a bit younger, but I was in a fairly senior position, because you just used to hire thousands of Polish blokes, basically. They've tried so many times changing how they produce stuff, and they still don't think there's an easy way. And sometimes you have to analyze that you have to do the least annoying or least difficult or least path of resistance way, and there isn't a perfect way. So if you look at various different businesses, sometimes it is a struggle. Sometimes drivers are a nightmare. Sometimes material suppliers are a nightmare. And it's trying to manage being the least path resistance is also because you might think, I've got a great idea, let's do that. But then there might be a weak link that will never, ever make that as slick as you can make it slick. I obviously know your systems focused, your process focused, you'd rely on tech to do X, Y, and Z so that you don't have to do it or employ someone to do it, which is all well and good. But their production, they tried killing all the turkeys and then plucking all the turkeys and then boxing them all up. They've tried killing them in weight categories and doing them in weight categories. They've tried, they've honestly tried everything and anything, and it just all boils down to none of it is easy. And that they change it up every year.
The interesting thing is, obviously, I know we're always gonna struggle. So rather, like, as in just volume's always gonna be difficult. So the way we're looking at it is third, third, a third. There'll always be a third of, and that's the goal, is to have a third of sites ahead of delivery, a third of sites that are on track, and a third that are behind. And what we want to build is a procedure of how to rebalance that in program management. And as long as we have a good procedure to manage that balancing, hence buying ourselves a 12 to 14 week expectation on delivery, we should always be able to reprogram with a grace period, because we don't need to be on site for 12 weeks every day. So by allowing a margin of error in the program planning with the client, meaning we don't hit any LEDs or anything of that nature, we should always be prepared for a failure, and then building procedures to re-kilter as opposed to trying to make it perfect. If anything falls outside the box, we're stuffed. So we're basically preparing for the downside. And that's why I think this process would work. But the key is to have that window. If we only allowed ourselves 4 weeks, all of it would go to shit, because that's when we'd need to adopt Stuart's model or something, where you've got 4 guys making the most of every day and
Like a
planning it
pod.
in that way, like a pod.
Well,
But because we're going to buy ourselves times, we have the time to move it around if we need to.
on fixed price contracts, there's a balance between quality control and speed. So it's Skyloft is limited by the quality of guys I've got. We've got X amount of teams, we can do X amount of lofts, and then based on the teams and relationships. Like, to give you an example, so beginning of the year, one of my fitters has had a labourer, and now semi-skilled labourer, lovely guy, for 5 years. Another team has had a guy for 4 years. These two, one's in their late 30s, one's in their mid 30s, and they are desperate to become their own team. Don't want to take the commitment individually, so we've decided over the Christmas party to pair them up from April. Massive risk in terms of what can go wrong, but they've proven themselves. They're lovely guys, customers love them, and they're ready for it. But that's taken a long time to sort of accumulate the knowledge and how we work and the systems, and then we're going to piece them together. Then they'll work together for about a year, we've said, before we then break them off again. So from the back of it, we'll get another 2 good teams that have been completely groomed the way that we want to work. They know the qualities we expect. They've been around the culture long enough, and it takes a long time. And then they'll have their own labourers that will come in, and the whole system will start again. People get older. My teams are my age. The backs aren't going to last forever. So we've got to change the model to make sure that they can come into more quality control and run hubs of 2 or 3 teams. And then it sort of makes sense for them to withhold the values we stand for and go and check the work religiously. But then prices increase. There's more quality control. There's more heads. So it's a tough gig, man. One thing a program won't do is quality control. That's for sure.
Yeah, quality control is key. But the critical difference between these 2 products that we're talking about is, like, yours is much more complicated. Like yours, as in
No,
your delivery.
it's not, because your volume. You're trying to do 400 refurbs a year. I mean, if I tried to do 400 lofts a year, we'd lose the reputation immediately, because it would just be way too thin to do what we do on that sort of volume. It would work if I had 27 areas across the country with 6 or 7 figureheads who had 5 teams. That would be the pyramid model I would try and run. So you've got everyone.
You've got planning and building regulation. We don't need to do that. You've got steels and structural designs. We don't need to do any designs. No designs whatsoever. No measures. Nothing. It's literally, we can send a lad in and go, here's your product spec, mate. You know what to do. We didn't even need a plan. He just makes sure that he'll go in, look at the property. We'll send him a video, and he knows what electrical layout needs to look like. He knows what the plumbing is. No one's in on site with him. There's not a sit in
So
or
I can't give
living.
them a package of 16,300 quid. That's what the package is. And these 3 or 4 anomalies are 3,100 and 500 quid. And if they come up, this is what you're getting for it. And then send them on his merry way. And then you just go in and check each stage with photos and videos for documentation. He will manage his electricians and plumbers to do the work on that job, because he won't get paid until that's been signed off.
So difficult.
But it's not.
We
It's just
tried
the
it.
quality of the guy, the head. You'll probably find that model would work better.
No, yes, we've got a guy that we use as a buffer, and he's been in this week as well to beef him out. So he'll take on 5 of us at any given time. We're going to probably give him 10, but finding him is a dime a dozen.
There's 5, so we'll give him 10. So he's going to be stretched at half capacity.
He's beefing out his team at the moment, and he's leaning off of his domestic stuff into our stuff because it's better continuity of work. So we're checking his capacity limits, but he's very, very good. We've tried for years to find other Adams. His name's Adam, and they're just not around. And those subcontractors have cost us more money than us actually delaying sites internally, because there's so many things you then have to check that you're not getting internally on reports and certificates on building control visits, and you have to check on them.
What if you just threw a load of money at Adam and got him to train and generate a team of pods? So you said, right, you're going to have 20 blokes underneath you. You need to make them Adams or Eves, depending on their gender. And you create the success out of them, and I'll pay you 20% more than you're on now.
What, as in
Some
hiring?
technicians aren't great managers, I'd say, on that.
Yeah, I'd
so you got
agree
to
with
go and
that.
you got to recruit other Adams. You got to go and find out where Adam eats, where he drinks, where he shops, where he sleeps, and go and find Adams.
I
That's how
know
you
what
do
Adam
that.
eats. He eats stewed apples.
He does, mate, and they were very
Let me
good. Yeah,
let me appreciate the feedback though, boys. So obviously, I take everything with a pinch of salt. My own ideas, the contracts manager's ideas, everything you've said, and ultimately, we got a 3-month process here to test it. And I might be wrong, and we might have to fucking pivot it, and we have to see. What I do know is the capacity's coming, and I got to prepare something for it, which is the challenge. But
There
we'll
you
see.
go.
Well, hopefully that ops guy, if he's worked in environments where there's been like these refurb frameworks where like because there's companies that do this right across like national on steroids, right, literally, but obviously for public sector, but they have to follow a methodology, and those staff that work in those companies, I just feel would be quite ideal if he's worked in one, and there'll be Adams all in those that know how to that follow the structure so they can consistently deliver. But hopefully your guy, the only thing that's what quite a bit of a red flag, just completely honestly, is it's very rare, very, very rare that you find a good ops guy with that salary that's available.
I've dug into him, so he's the reason being, and he's shown me this and been very transparent with it. But he was working for some Florida guys. They sold him the dream. He delivered loads of stuff for them, and by December, he handed his note. Well, he handed his notice in November and left not so amicably in December because the Florida guys were trying to pawn off all this work onto him, and he was saying, and he's got different offers around. I've vetted him on LinkedIn, vetted his company house history and the stories he was saying. So he seems legit. But yeah, agreed. When someone of that nature is available, you go, why? Why are you not in work?
Yeah. I think a good idea of what and this is just to anyone out there listening about, like, this is like a project, right, or like an operational project. What you can do is just leave your phone in the corner of a room somewhere, really like get into your zone in your head and think to yourself, if I ran a business that solely did this, what would it look like? What could be our workflows? What team would I need? And then do one idea and scrap it and think, what could I do differently to flip this completely upside down? So it's not pod work, it's flow work. And you could then do regional people that are running around and they got to visit 50 sites in a day, or you've got one person that manages 5, and you can think about and then what I'd recommend is just split testing it. Run 10 that way, run 10 that way, see how you get on. Because you've got the volume to split test, and that's not something we've touched on yet, but we do split testing quite frequently with our processes in our surveying business. And then you go, that was so much easier. And you go to the surveyor, the client, the manager, and figure out which was the sort of easiest way to work that process. And obviously time, quality, and cost are the 3 things that should be monitored constantly. And split testing is I find one of the best ways to figure out the best solution.
Yeah.
exactly what we've done with Skylofts. We do exactly what Jack just said. I took almost 4 to 5 months between stuff. Getting the phone to ring and selling was, in my opinion, the easy bit. It was building the whole system and process. But obviously, having another business, leaving that, and then setting up again, it was almost like if you took XP surveys and went, right, let's just scrap it and start again, and I'll give you 3 months to build every single process. It would come out a completely different animal because you'd have the time and the headspace. And that's what I had to build that in when I built Skylofts, which was one of the best things I've ever done. So it's difficult when you've got a moving beast already that's continually churning. Split testing is hard work because you know that one's going to be better than the other, and then you've got to clean up the mess of the one that wasn't as good than the other. So, yeah.
But as long as the team are aware of that, as long as you say, look, we're going to do this. If you struggle with a job, we're here to support you. But we need to.
Well, we're doing that now with you. We're doing that with XP surveys. We've got a few surveys being done by hand. The team is change management, which no one wants to break something that isn't broken. But I'm looking at doubling the revenue with half the staff, with the main staff. So I need to get twice as much out of the people. So we are split tested now, and the winner will rise to the top. Cream will rise to the top, I'm hoping.
Thanks, guys.